I still remember the way my aunt said it, like she wasn't trying to start a fight, but also like she knew she was dropping a bomb I couldn't ignore. We were in her kitchen, sunlight coming through the blinds, coffee still steaming in front of me, when she leaned in and said, "Your dad changed the will." Didn't lead into it, just dropped it flat on the table like a card in a poker game. At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't believe her. My dad and I, well, we've had our ups and downs, but I didn't think he'd actually go behind my back like that. Truth is, I thought my aunt was just stirring the pot, But then she said something that made my stomach twist. "Your mom's name isn't even on the documents anymore." That stopped me cold. My mom passed away 5 years ago, and the will they had together had been in place for as long as I could remember. She'd always told me I'd be taken care of, that certain things like the old family house would always be mine one day. And now my aunt was telling me that promise had been erased. I tried to act calm, but inside, I was running through every conversation I'd had with Dad since Mom died, looking for clues. And the more I thought about it, the more little things started adding up. He'd been distant lately, defensive, even. And Linda, his new wife, well, let's just say she had a way of smiling at me that felt like she was sizing me up for something. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. My aunt sipped her coffee, eyes steady. "Because your mom wouldn't want you blindsided, and because there's something you should know. Your mom was smarter than people gave her credit for." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head. "If it's still where I think it is, you'll find it." I pressed her for more, but she wouldn't say another word. I left her house more confused than when I got there, but also with this itch in the back of my mind. You ever get that? That pull to go digging, even when you're not sure what you'll find? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, "Your dad changed the will," and imagining all the ways that could be true. Around midnight, I found myself in my car, driving to the old family house. Dad still lived there with Linda, but I knew they'd gone out of town for the weekend. It felt weird, unlocking the door, stepping into the quiet. The place smelled the same, like wood polish and the faint trace of Mom's favorite lavender cleaner, but it didn't feel the same. Her photos had been moved around, some gone entirely. I wandered through the rooms, half expecting to find nothing, half hoping I'd trip over whatever my aunt was hinting at. And then I remembered the attic. Growing up, it had been Mom's treasure chest, boxes of keepsakes, old letters, photo albums, stuff she couldn't part with. Dad never went up there. The pull-down ladder creaked under my weight as I climbed, dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight. The air was heavy, still. I started opening boxes, flipping through stacks of yellowed papers, until I found one marked "Personal." Inside were photos of me and Mom, the little notes she'd written in her neat handwriting, and at the very bottom, taped to the inside of the box, was an envelope. My name was on it, and I swear for a second I forgot how to breathe. I pulled it free, the tape crackling, and just stared. The paper was slightly brittle, edges curled, but her handwriting was exactly as I remembered. Steady, warm, unmistakably hers. My hands shook as I held it, and I thought about what could be inside. Was it a letter? Instructions? A goodbye? I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, the envelope in my lap, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me didn't want to open it, not yet, because once I did, I couldn't go back. But then I thought about Dad, about Linda, about the will being changed, and I knew. Whatever was in here, I needed to see it. I slid my finger under the flap, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The first line made my throat tighten. "If you're reading this, it means I can't be there to tell you myself." I just sat there for a second, holding that letter like it was the most fragile thing in the world, And truth is, part of me wanted to stop right there, to just keep imagining what Mom might have said instead of actually reading it. But curiosity's a funny thing, it eats at you. So I unfolded the paper, careful not to tear it, and started reading. "If you're reading this, it means I can't be there to tell you myself," she wrote, "and it also means something I feared might happen, has happened." My stomach tightened. She went on. "Your father is a good man in many ways, but he can be influenced. If he has remarried, or is planning to, there is a chance he may decide to change our will. I can't stop him, but I can make sure you have what I promised you." I stopped for a moment, just staring at her handwriting. She'd written this before she even got sick, like she could see the future. "I've placed certain documents in a safety deposit box at the bank." The letter continued, "In your name only. Inside, you'll find the deed to my parents' property, an account I've saved for you, and some personal items I want you to have. This is yours, Michael. No one can take it from you." My throat felt tight. I hadn't thought about my grandparents' property in years. It was this old place out near the lake, small but beautiful. The kind of spot that felt untouched by time. She must have held onto it quietly all this time. "If you need help accessing it," she wrote, "I've told your Aunt Margaret where to direct you. She'll know when it's time." And that's when it clicked. My aunt hadn't just been warning me. She'd been guiding me. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my jacket like it was worth $1 million. Because in a way, it was. My heart was pounding as I climbed down from the attic, every creak of the ladder echoing in the empty house. I locked the door behind me and drove straight to my aunt's place. She didn't act surprised when I showed her the letter. "Your mom trusted me," she said simply. "The bank is First National, downtown. Ask for Mr. Dalton, he's been there forever." The next morning, I was standing in the marble lobby of First National, letter in hand, explaining to the receptionist why I was there. 10 minutes later, an older man in a suit, Mr. Dalton, came out to greet me. His eyes lit up when I told him my mom's name. She was one of the sharpest clients I ever had, he said, leading me to a private room. He disappeared for a few minutes and came back carrying a small metal box. "Been waiting here for you," he said with a smile. My hands felt clammy as I unlocked it. Inside were exactly what Mom had described. The deed to my grandparents' lake property, a passbook for a savings account with more money than I expected, and a small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch and found a gold locket. Inside was a tiny photo of me as a kid on one side, and on the other, her and Dad on their wedding day. That one hit me in the gut. She'd kept their photo in here even though she'd anticipated what might happen. I sat there for a while, just letting it all sink in. This wasn't just about money or property, it was about Mom making sure I wasn't left out of the life they built. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got at Dad. Not just for changing the will, but for doing it without telling me, for making me find out through my aunt. As I left the bank, I knew I had two choices: confront him right away and show my hand, or wait and let him think I had nothing. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized letting him underestimate me might be the smarter move. Because something told me Dad and Linda weren't done yet. And if Mom was right, this was only the beginning. 2 weeks went by and I didn't hear a word from Dad, you know. Which was weird because usually if he thought I'd done something wrong, or if he even suspected I was upset, he'd call just to smooth things over, or at least to make it look like he was the bigger person. But this time, nothing. And truth is, I didn't mind. I was using that time to get my ducks in a row, transferring the deed into my secure file, moving the savings into a new account under my control, even getting the lake property checked out by a friend who's a contractor. I wanted to know exactly what I had before I even thought about confronting him. Then, out of nowhere, a letter shows up at my door. Not from him, no. From a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it and right there in the first line, "Our client, Mr. Thompson, has updated his estate plans and would like to offer you a settlement to avoid any potential disputes." That word hit me like a slap. They were trying to pay me off to stay quiet, to sign something that said I'd never challenge whatever he was giving Linda and whoever else he thought deserved it more than his own son. I laughed an actual, full laugh because they had no idea Mom had already secured everything that mattered. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove straight to my aunt's and showed her the letter. She read it, sighed, and said, "They're getting nervous." And she was right, nervous people make mistakes. A few days later, Dad called. This time I picked up. His voice was tight, almost rehearsed. "We should talk about the estate," he said. "We don't need lawyers getting involved in family matters." I leaned back in my chair, kept my voice calm. "There's nothing to talk about, I have what I need." Mom made sure of it. Silence. I could almost hear him turning to look at Linda, like she'd have the next line for him. "What are you talking about?" he finally asked. And I just smiled even though he couldn't see it. "Don't worry about it." He tried to press, but I kept my answers short. Vague. The less he knew, the better. A week later, he shows up at my door unannounced. He's holding a bottle of wine, like we're about to have some father-son dinner, but his eyes give him away. This isn't a social visit. We sit at the table and he starts in about keeping the family together and not letting misunderstandings fester. Then he circles back to the will, saying how things change and we all have to adjust. I let him talk, let him think he's in control of the conversation. And then, when he's finally winding down, I lean in and say, "Dad, I know you changed the will. I know Linda's name is on things that used to have Mom's, and I know you thought that would leave me with nothing. But here's the thing, you're too late." His face froze, like he'd been caught off guard for the first time in years. "What do you mean?" he asked. But I could tell from his eyes he already knew. Mom made sure I was taken care of. Property, money, things you can't touch. So whatever you and Linda had planned, it's not going to work. He didn't say a word, just stared at me for a long moment, then looked down at the table. I could feel the tension in the room, heavy and sharp. Finally, he stood up, muttered something about needing to think, and left. That was the last time we talked about the will. Word got around, of course. Families like ours, there's always someone talking. My cousin asked me if it was true, if Mom had left me the lake house. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. Let them wonder. And every time I drive out there now, every time I walk through that quiet property with the trees swaying and the water just visible through the branches, I think about her, about how she played the long game, about how she knew exactly what kind of man Dad could be when someone else was whispering in his ear. And I feel this mix of sadness and pride, sadness that it came to this. Pride that I honored what she wanted. I didn't have to fight in court. I didn't have to beg for scraps. I just had to trust that she'd seen further ahead than I ever could. And she had. Dad and I. We're civil now. Holidays are polite. Short. Surface level. Linda avoids eye contact. And me? I keep my distance, not out of spite, but because I've got nothing left to prove. They thought they could cut me out. But Mom made sure the most important parts of my inheritance, both the tangible and the intangible, would never be in their hands. And trust me, that's a kind of victory you can't put a price on. You know, I thought that was the end of it. I had what Mom left me. Dad and Linda had whatever they thought they deserved, and we could all just go our separate ways. But a few months later, I got this call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years telling me there was another box. One Mom never told anyone about. And guess where it was? Let's just say, the person holding it had every reason not to give it to me.